Jake stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the loading dock of station's scrapyard sector. The smell of burnt metal and recycled air hit him immediately. Around him, aliens of every shape and size moved through the crowded marketplace, shouting in languages his translator could barely keep up with. He needed parts. His salvage ship had suffered a navigation failure 3 days ago, and the repair costs at the station's official shops were more than he could afford. The scrapyard was his only option. Jake walked past rows of discarded machinery. Broken engines the size of houses sat next to mountains of twisted metal and computer cores. Everything here had been declared worthless by someone, but Jake had learned long ago that one person's trash often held value if you knew where to look. A tall creature blocked his path. Its 6 arms folded across its chitinous chest as it looked down at Jake with compound eyes that reflected the harsh overhead lights. "Human," the creature clicked, its translator turning the sounds into flat, mechanical words. "You waste time here. Human technology is primitive. You cannot understand what you see." Jake recognized the species. They controlled most of the robotics industry in this sector and had a reputation for looking down on everyone else, especially humans. "I'm just looking for navigation parts," Jake said calmly. "I can pay." They made a sound like grinding gears. Its name tag read, "Navigation parts, yes, follow, I show you what humans can afford." Led Jake deeper into the scrapyard, past newer equipment and into older sections where rust and corrosion marked everything. They stopped at a pile of broken sensors and cracked display screens. "Here," said, "cheap for cheap species." Jake ignored the insult and began sorting through the pile. Most of it was genuinely worthless, but he found a few components that might work. As he searched, something caught his eye in the pile behind him. It was large, maybe 8 feet tall, humanoid in shape, a robot heavily damaged and half buried under other scrap. Jake moved closer, his engineer's curiosity pulling him forward. The robot's metal frame was scorched black in places. One arm was missing entirely. Its legs were bent at odd angles. The head unit hung forward, and a massive crack ran across what looked like its central processor housing. But despite the damage, Jake could see the craftsmanship. This was sophisticated work. "What's this?" Jake asked, pointing at the robot. Turned and clicked its mandibles dismissively. "KX-7 combat unit. Failed, broken beyond repair. We tried to salvage, core programming corrupted, dangerous, worthless even for parts." Jake walked around the robot, examining it more closely. The design was unusual. Most robots he had seen were bulky and angular, built for raw power. This one had different proportions, almost elegant. The neural architecture visible through the cracked housing looked more complex than standard models. "What happened to it?" Jake asked. Made another grinding sound. "Mission failure, received conflicting orders during combat evacuation. Could not decide, entered system loop, shut down completely. Our engineers attempted forced reset, made corruption worse. We declared it defective, scrap." "How much?" Jake asked. The question seemed to surprise. The alien's antennae twitched rapidly. "You want this? It is garbage, cannot be repaired." "How much?" Jake repeated. His mandibles clicked in what Jake had learned was laughter. Other aliens nearby turned to watch. Word spread quickly. The human wanted to buy the corrupted robot. 50 credits, said, clearly amused. It was highway robbery for scrap, but Jake had spent more on worse gambles. He transferred the credits from his account. His laughter grew louder, joined by other workers nearby. "Foolish human," said, "that machine is dead. You buy expensive paperweight. Go ahead, try to fix. You will fail like our best engineers failed. Proves humans cannot match technology." Jake arranged for a cargo loader to transport the robot to his workshop. As he waited, more aliens gathered to watch. They whispered and pointed. Some laughed. Others just shook their heads at human stupidity. The robot was heavier than it looked. The cargo loader groaned under the weight as it lifted the machine onto Jake's small transport platform. Jake secured it with magnetic clamps and started the slow journey back to the lower levels of the station. Station was enormous, a massive ring-shaped structure that housed over 1 million beings from hundreds of species. The upper levels were clean and bright, filled with shops and luxury apartments. The lower levels, where Jake lived and worked, were darker and more crowded. But rent was cheap, and nobody asked too many questions. Jake's workshop was a small space carved out of an old storage bay. He shared it with his business partner, Lisa, who looked up from her computer as Jake guided the transport platform through the door. "Please tell me you found the navigation parts," Lisa said. "Better," Jake replied, unhooking the magnetic clamps. The robot slid off the platform with a heavy thud that shook the floor. Lisa stood up, her eyes widening as she took in the damaged machine. "Jake, tell me you didn't buy a broken alien robot with money we need for ship repairs." 50 credits, Jake said. 50 credits we don't have to spare, Lisa said, walking around the robot. She was younger than Jake, barely 25, but she had a sharp mind for business and a talent for keeping Jake's more impulsive decisions from bankrupting them. "What is it?" "Combat unit, model KX-7. The scrapyard boss said it had a programming failure. They couldn't fix it." Lisa knelt down, examining the crack in the processor housing. "If they couldn't fix it, what makes you think we can? They built it. They know their own technology better than we do." Jake grabbed a work light and directed it at the robot's head unit. Through the crack, he could see the neural pathways. They were intricate, branching in patterns he had never seen in standard military robots. "Look at this architecture. This isn't normal. It's too complex for simple command-response programming." Lisa leaned closer, her skepticism fading into professional interest. "That is unusual," she admitted. "But unusual doesn't mean fixable. Jake, we have 3 repair jobs waiting and our ship still can't navigate. We don't have time for this." "I know," Jake said. He did know. Logically, Lisa was right. They had pressing needs and limited resources, but something about this robot called to him. All his best discoveries had started with this feeling, a hunch that everyone else was wrong. "Just give me a few days. If I can't make progress, we'll resell it for parts." Lisa sighed. She had worked with Jake long enough to know that once he got an idea in his head, arguing was pointless. "A few days, that's it, and you still need to finish the Johnson sensor array by tomorrow." "I will," Jake promised. He was already pulling out his diagnostic equipment, eager to begin. As Lisa returned to her desk, Jake connected a scanner to the robot's exposed processor. The device hummed to life, sending weak electrical pulses through the dormant neural pathways. Information began scrolling across Jake's handheld display. What he saw made his pulse quicken. They were right about one thing: the core programming was corrupted, but they were wrong about why. The corruption wasn't random system decay. It was a logical conflict so severe that the robot had essentially torn itself apart trying to resolve it. Jake spent the first 3 days simply trying to understand what he was looking at. The robot's neural architecture was unlike anything in his reference databases. Every time he thought he understood one system, he discovered 3 more layers beneath it. Lisa brought him coffee on the morning of the 4th day. "You look terrible," she said. Jake rubbed his eyes. He had slept maybe 10 hours total since bringing the robot home. "I'm close to something. I can feel it." "Close to what?" Lisa asked. She pulled up a chair beside his workstation, looking at the screens filled with code and diagnostic readouts. "They said the robot failed because it received conflicting orders," Jake explained, pointing at a section of corrupted code. "I found the record of what happened. During a civilian evacuation, 2 officers of equal rank gave it contradictory commands. One ordered it to defend the extraction point. The other ordered it to push forward and clear a path." "So it couldn't decide which order to follow," Lisa said. "Exactly. The robot's core programming demanded absolute obedience to ranking officers. But these 2 officers had the same rank. The robot tried to follow both orders simultaneously. It couldn't. The contradiction created a recursive loop. The processor kept trying to solve an impossible equation until the whole system crashed." Lisa frowned. "That's a serious design flaw. Why would they build something that could fail so catastrophically?" "I don't think they meant to," Jake said. He pulled up another screen showing the robot's base architecture. "Look at this. The neural network is designed for complex decision-making, independent analysis, creative problem-solving, but then look at this layer." He highlighted a section of code. "This is a control framework. It overrides all that sophisticated processing and forces rigid obedience to commands." "They built something intelligent and then crippled it?" Lisa asked. "That's what it looks like. And when the control framework encountered a problem it couldn't solve, it destroyed everything." Lisa leaned back in her chair, processing this information. "So what are you going to do?" Jake smiled. "I'm going to remove the control framework entirely." "That's insane," Lisa said immediately. Jake, this is a military combat robot. Those controls are probably there for a reason. What if you remove them and it goes rogue? The controls already failed, Jake pointed out. They made the robot worse, not better. I think we should try something different. Different how? Jake pulled up a new file on his screen. I've been researching human AI ethics protocols, the stuff we developed back on Earth for our own artificial intelligence systems. What if we program the robot with those instead? Give it a framework based on ethical reasoning rather than blind obedience. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see her working through the implications. Finally, she said, "You want to teach a war machine to think like a human." "I want to let it think, period," Jake said. "The architecture is already there. We just need to give it the right foundation." "This could take weeks," Lisa said. "We have bills to pay, Jake." "I know, I'll keep up with the other work, I promise. But Lisa, if this works, it could be huge, not just for us, for AI development everywhere. Proof that ethical programming creates better results than authoritarian control." Lisa stood up and looked at the damaged robot. Its optical sensors remained dark, lifeless. "Okay," she said, "but I'm helping. This is too big for you to handle alone." Over the next 2 weeks, Jake and Lisa worked together on the most ambitious project of their lives. Jake focused on carefully extracting the control code, while Lisa researched human ethics frameworks and adapted them for the robot's alien architecture. It was delicate work. The control code had tendrils throughout the entire system. Removing it risked causing cascading failures. Twice, Jake nearly triggered a complete core meltdown. The second time, every alarm in the workshop screamed at once, and they had to emergency shut down the entire neural network. "Maybe they were right," Jake said after that scare, his hands shaking slightly. "Maybe this thing really is too corrupted to save." "No," Lisa said firmly. She had been quiet and cautious at first, but now she was as invested as Jake. "The corruption isn't in the robot, it's in what they did to it. We just need to be more careful." They developed a new approach. Instead of ripping out the control code all at once, they slowly replaced it piece by piece with new ethical reasoning protocols. Each change was tested extensively before moving to the next section. Word spread through the station about what they were doing. Other engineers stopped by the workshop, curious or skeptical. A few offered advice. Most just shook their heads and wished them luck. The reaction was more hostile. Arrived at the workshop on the 10th day with 2 other members of his species. They demanded Jake stop immediately. "You violate treaties," declared. "Military technology is proprietary. You have no authorization to modify." Jake stood his ground. "I bought this robot legally. It was declared scrap. That means it's no longer military property." "The technology inside remains ours," another insisted. "Then you should have recycled it completely instead of selling it," Lisa said coldly. She had little patience for this arrogance. The 3 aliens left, but not before warning that there would be consequences. Jake tried not to let it bother him, but he started locking the workshop door at night. On the 18th day, Jake wrote the final lines of base code. The new framework was complete. It would allow the robot to analyze situations, consider multiple perspectives, evaluate ethical implications, and make autonomous decisions based on core principles rather than rigid commands. "Ready?" Jake asked Lisa. She nodded, though she looked nervous. "If this doesn't work, we'll have wasted 3 weeks and all our savings." "It'll work," Jake said with more confidence than he felt. He activated the startup sequence. The robot's systems hummed to life. Jake watched the diagnostic screens as power flowed through the neural pathways. The processor began running startup checks. So far, everything looked normal. Then the optical sensors flickered. Once, twice. They glowed with a soft blue light, completely different from the red they had programmed. The robot's head moved slowly, looking around the workshop. Its gaze settled on Jake and Lisa. For a long moment, nobody moved. "System online," the robot said. Its voice was deeper than Jake expected, but clear. "Neural network functional, all primary systems operational." Jake let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "How do you feel?" The robot tilted its head slightly. "Feel, interesting word choice. I am processing, analyzing, learning. I have access to my full cognitive capabilities. This is new." The robot looked at its damaged body. "I am aware that I am incomplete, damaged, but my mind is clear for the first time since my creation." Do you remember what happened to you? Lisa asked carefully. Yes, the evacuation on Theta Station, the conflicting orders, the cascade failure. I could not reconcile the contradiction. My previous programming would not allow me to question or deviate from orders, even when those orders were logically impossible. I was trapped in my own mind. That won't happen again, Jake said. Your new programming lets you think independently. You can question, you can choose. The robot was quiet for several seconds. Then it asked, "Why did you do this? The other entity indicated I was worthless. Why did you invest resources in repairing me?" Jake smiled. Because I saw potential that others missed, and because everyone deserves a chance to be more than what they were built to be. The robot's optical sensors brightened slightly. I do not have a designation that feels appropriate anymore. They called me Unit KX7, but I am no longer what they created. How about KEX? Lisa suggested. It's close to your original designation, but different, a new start. KEX, the robot repeated, testing the name. I find this acceptable. Thank you, Jake and Lisa, for giving me thought, for giving me choice. How may I begin to understand my purpose now? Jake looked at Lisa, who was grinning despite trying to look professional. They had done it. Against all odds and expert opinions, they had brought something dead back to life and made it better than it had ever been. First, Jake said, we need to repair your physical frame, and I think you should help with that. You'll learn faster by doing. I would like that, Kex said. Over the next few days, word spread further through station that the human engineer had successfully repaired the corrupted robot. Engineers from multiple species came to see Kex, asking questions and examining Jake's work. Kex learned at a speed that amazed even Jake. Within a week, the robot had mastered basic repairs on its own frame. Within 2 weeks, it was suggesting improvements to Jake's workshop organization and helping with client projects. But it was the questions that surprised Jake most. Kex asked about everything. Why humans valued certain things over others, how different species communicated, what made something right or wrong when rules conflicted. The robot thought constantly, analyzing and building its understanding of the world. I have been reading about human history, Kex said one morning while helping Jake install a new power relay in a client's ship. Humans have repeatedly fought against systems of absolute control, yet you also create laws and structures. How do you determine when authority should be followed and when it should be questioned? Jake tightened a bolt before answering. That's complicated. I guess it depends on whether the authority respects the fundamental rights of individuals. If a rule protects people, it's probably worth following. If it harms people just to maintain power, it should be questioned. And who decides what constitutes harm? Kex asked. That's the hard part, Jake admitted. Different people have different ideas. That's why we debate and discuss and try to find common ground. It's messy, but it's better than blindly following orders. Kex's optical sensors dimmed slightly. A sign Jake had learned meant the robot was processing something complex. The programmed me to never question. You program me to always question. Is your approach not also a form of control? Jake smiled. He loved when Kex challenged him. Maybe, but there's a difference. I gave you the tools to question, including questioning me. The tried to remove your ability to question at all. Do you see the distinction? I do, Kex said after a moment. One framework empowers thought, the other suppresses it. I prefer empowerment. Lisa entered the workshop carrying a data pad. Jake, you need to see this. The station is hosting the annual engineering challenge next month. There's still time to register an entry. Jake had heard of the challenge. It was a big event where different species and companies showed off their latest technology. What about it? I think we should enter Kex, Lisa said. Both Jake and Kex turned to look at her. The challenge is pretty competitive, Jake said carefully. Major corporations enter their best work. We'd be up against professional teams with huge budgets. Exactly, Lisa said. Which is why it would mean something if we did well. Kex represents a completely different approach to AI. People need to see what's possible when you prioritize ethical reasoning over rigid control. I am uncertain, Kex said. I was designed for combat, not competition. I do not know if my capabilities are suited for the challenge. The challenge tests adaptability, problem-solving, and creative thinking, Lisa said. You excel at all of those, and your physical repairs are almost complete. Jake's been upgrading your frame with hybrid components that are actually better than your original parts. She was right about that. Jake had fabricated new limbs using a combination of human manufacturing techniques and salvaged alien materials. Kex was stronger and more precise than any standard model. "What do you think, Kex?" Jake asked. "It's your choice." The robot considered this. "If my participation can demonstrate the value of ethical programming, then I should do it, though I admit I feel something that my databases suggest might be nervousness." "That's normal," Jake said. "It means you care about doing well. We'll prepare as much as we can." They registered for the challenge the next day. The announcement that a robot would be competing spread quickly through the station. Reactions were mixed. Some people were excited to see what Kex could do. Others thought it was foolish to enter a modified piece of scrap against cutting-edge technology. The response was predictable. Publicly declared that Kex would embarrass itself and prove that human engineering was inferior. The corporation entered their own latest model, the KX-9, specifically to demonstrate the superiority of their approach. Jake spent the next month training with Kex. The challenge course was designed to test multiple capabilities. Contestants had to navigate obstacles, solve puzzles under pressure, demonstrate precision and strength, and adapt to unexpected complications. Kex practiced daily, learning the limits of its new frame and developing strategies for different scenarios. But more importantly, Kex learned to trust its own judgment. Jake encouraged the robot to find its own solutions rather than following predetermined approaches. "Don't just do what you're told or what's expected," Jake said during one training session. "Think about what makes sense. The best engineers aren't the ones who follow instructions perfectly. They're the ones who see better ways to achieve the goal." On the day of the challenge, the station's main arena was packed. Thousands of spectators from dozens of species filled the seats. Vendors sold food and merchandise. Giant screens displayed information about each contestant. Jake stood in the preparation area with Kex and Lisa. Around them, other teams made final adjustments to their entries. The team occupied a large section nearby. Their KX-9 model stood motionless, its red optical sensors glowing with cold precision. It was sleek and new, built with the latest technology. Approached Jake's group. "Your scrap robot looks almost presentable," the alien clicked. "But appearance means nothing. When the challenge begins, everyone will see the truth. Engineering cannot be surpassed by human tricks." "We'll see," Jake said calmly. The competition began with a strength test. Each robot had to lift and precisely place heavy objects. The KX-9 performed flawlessly, moving massive weights with mechanical efficiency. When Kex's turn came, the robot matched the performance exactly, showing neither struggle nor error. Next came precision work. Contestants had to assemble a complex mechanism with parts that fit together within micrometers of tolerance. Again, both robots performed perfectly. The crowd began to murmur. The modified scrap robot was keeping pace with the model. The third test was navigation through a hazardous obstacle course. The robot calculated the optimal path and executed it without deviation. Fast and efficient, Kex approached differently. The robot analyzed the course, then found a path that was slightly slower but used less energy and created less wear on its systems. It was thinking about long-term efficiency, not just immediate speed. The judges, mostly officials, marked Kex down for the slower time. Jake saw Lisa clench her fists in frustration, but he stayed calm. This was expected. The fourth test changed everything. Contestants faced a complex puzzle that required 3 simultaneous actions in different locations. It was designed to be impossible for a single operator. Teams were supposed to use multiple robots or operators working together. The team brought out 2 additional robots to assist their KX-9. Together, the 3 machines solved the puzzle in 12 minutes. Other teams used similar approaches, some taking longer, some shorter. When Kex stepped up to the puzzle, Jake saw the robot's optical sensors brighten. Kex stood still for almost 2 minutes just analyzing. The crowd grew restless. People whispered that the robot had frozen, that maybe the old programming corruption had returned. Then Kex moved, but not to the 3 control points. Instead, the robot went to a maintenance panel on the side of the puzzle mechanism that Jake hadn't even noticed. Kex opened the panel and began rewiring something inside. "What is it doing?" Lisa whispered. "I have no idea," Jake said, fascinated. Kex closed the panel and moved to a single control point. The robot input a complex sequence of commands. The puzzle mechanism hummed, lights flashing in rapid succession. Then a tone sounded. Puzzle complete. Time, 4 minutes 30 seconds. The arena went silent for a heartbeat. Then someone in the crowd cheered. Others joined in. Soon half the arena was applauding. The head judge, an official named Al, demanded an explanation. That robot modified the puzzle. That is against regulations. Kex spoke clearly, its voice carrying through the arena speakers. I analyzed the stated objective, complete the puzzle. I found that the puzzle mechanism contained a bypass option, likely installed for maintenance purposes. Using this option fulfilled the objective more efficiently than the intended method. I violated no stated rule. Al's antennae twitched in agitation. The spirit of the challenge is to solve puzzles as designed, not to find shortcuts. The spirit of engineering is to find the best solution to a problem, Kex replied. If the challenge wanted to prevent my approach, the bypass should not have existed, or there should have been an explicit rule against using it. I made a reasoned choice based on the information and rules provided. The crowd's noise grew louder. Many people were laughing or cheering. The judges huddled together, arguing among themselves. Finally, they announced that Kex's completion was valid. The rules had not explicitly forbidden the approach. The final test was adaptive response. Contestants faced a scenario that changed randomly, forcing them to adjust their strategy in real time. It was the ultimate test of flexible thinking. Kex performed beautifully. Every time the scenario shifted, the robot analyzed the new situation and adapted instantly. It showed creativity and problem-solving that made the rigid, programmed responses look mechanical and limited. When all tests were complete, the judges deliberated. Jake watched the officials talking among themselves, their body language tense. He had a bad feeling. The results were announced. Third place went to a team, second place went to Kex, first place went to the KX-9. The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Even non-humans were yelling that the judging was unfair. Kex had clearly outperformed the KX-9 in creativity and adaptability. Al defended the decision. The KX-9 represents the pinnacle of reliable, consistent engineering. While the modified unit showed interesting problem-solving, it also demonstrated unpredictability. First place must go to the most dependable technology. It was politics, pure and simple. The judges couldn't let a piece of scrap defeat the model. It would be too embarrassing for them. But as Jake stood there, watching aliens from dozens of species crowd around Kex to ask questions and offer congratulations, he realized they had won something more important than a trophy. They had proven that their approach worked, that ethical programming created better results than authoritarian control. A human woman approached them. She wore the uniform of a station official. I'm Commander Stevens. I wanted to congratulate you on your performance. That puzzle solution was brilliant. And I wanted you to know that while the official results were what they were, everyone here saw the truth. Thank you, Commander, Jake said. Kex stood quietly, processing the day's events. Finally, the robot said, I do not feel disappointed about second place. I feel satisfied. I made choices based on my own analysis and reasoning. The outcome is less important than the fact that I had the freedom to try. Lisa smiled. That's the whole point, Kex. You thought for yourself. You can't put a price on that. As they left the arena, Jake noticed watching from a distance. The alien didn't approach, didn't speak, but something in its posture had changed. Maybe it was uncertainty, maybe it was the first hint of doubt. Jake's comm device started buzzing with messages, requests for his engineering services. 3 months passed after the engineering challenge. Jake's business thrived. Clients from across the station came to him for difficult repairs and custom modifications. Kex worked alongside him, learning new skills and becoming more sophisticated with each passing day. Lisa managed the growing demand, scheduling jobs and handling the business side. They moved to a larger workshop and even hired 2 assistants. It was more success than Jake had imagined when he first bought that damaged robot from the scrapyard. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Jake was teaching Kex about advanced welding techniques when the station's emergency alarm blared to life. The sound was different from normal drills, sharper, more urgent. Emergency alert, the station computer announced. Critical incident in Sector 7. All personnel evacuate affected areas. Emergency services respond immediately. Jake and Kex exchanged glances. Sector 7 was on the station's outer ring, a busy commercial and residential area. "Come on," Jake said, grabbing his emergency kit. "They might need help." They reached Sector 7's checkpoint to find chaos. People ran in every direction, some screaming, others crying. Smoke poured from one of the main corridors. Station security struggled to establish a perimeter and direct the evacuation. Jake grabbed a security officer. "What happened?" "Cargo hauler malfunctioned during docking," the officer said quickly. "Engine exploded, took out the docking clamp and ruptured the primary life support hub. The whole section is coming apart." That was catastrophic. The life support hub controlled air, temperature, and pressure for a quarter of the station. If it failed completely, thousands could die. Emergency teams arrived in force. Firefighters worked to contain the blaze. Engineers assessed the structural damage. Medical personnel set up triage stations, and rescue teams prepared to search for survivors. Commander Stevens appeared, coordinating the response from a mobile command center. Her face was grim as she reviewed damage reports on multiple screens. Jake approached her. "Commander, is there anything we can do to help?" Stevens looked up. She recognized Jake and Kex from the engineering challenge. "Not unless you can pull off another miracle. We have 17 people trapped in the damaged section. The rupture vented most of the atmosphere before emergency seals kicked in. They're in a small maintenance room that still has air, but the route to them is completely blocked." "Blocked how?" Jake asked. Stevens pulled up a 3D map of the damaged area. Jake's heart sank as he saw the extent of the destruction. Collapsed bulkheads, twisted support beams, severed power conduits sparking with deadly electricity, and massive chunks of debris forming an impassable maze. "We can't get rescue teams through without proper equipment," Stevens explained. "And if we use heavy machinery to clear the path, the vibrations could trigger a complete structural collapse. Everyone inside would be crushed." "How much time do they have?" Lisa asked. She had followed Jake and Kex to the scene. "Maybe 2 hours before the air runs out, less if anyone is injured and breathing heavy." Stevens turned to her rescue team commander. "What are our options?" The commander, a tall alien with 6 arms and skin, shook his head. "Standard extraction is impossible. The structural integrity is too compromised. We would need something small enough to navigate the debris, strong enough to move obstacles safely, and smart enough to assess collapse risks in real time. We don't have anything that meets all those requirements." Jake looked at Kex. The robot's optical sensors were already studying the damage map. "Kex could do it," Jake said. The rescue commander turned to look at the robot. "That's a combat unit, designed for destruction, not delicate rescue work." "Not anymore," Jake said. "Kex has been independent thinking, adaptive problem-solving, and Kex's current frame is actually perfect for this. Strong enough to move debris, but precise enough to do it safely." Stevens studied Kex carefully. "You're the robot that solved the impossible puzzle at the engineering challenge, the one they said was corrupted scrap." "I was corrupted," Kex said. "Jake repaired me and gave me the ability to think freely. I can navigate that environment, Commander. I can assess risks and make real-time decisions. And I am expendable in a way that organic rescue workers are not." "You're not expendable," Jake said firmly. "Compared to 17 living beings, I am," Kex replied calmly. "This is a logical assessment, not self-deprecation. I should attempt the rescue." Before Stevens could respond, a group of officials pushed through the crowd. Led them, his antennae waving in agitation. "We heard you are considering using the corrupted robot for rescue operations. This is foolish. We have proper rescue units available." "Those units are 3 hours away," Stevens said. "We don't have 3 hours." "Then use our combat models stationed on the station," another insisted. "They are designed for difficult environments." Stevens shook her head. "I've seen the specifications for combat robots. They're built for demolition and warfare. They follow orders without deviation. In an unstable environment like this, that rigidity could kill people." "The corrupted unit is worse," argued. "It is unpredictable, defective. It could malfunction at any moment." "I have not malfunctioned since my reprogramming," Kex said. "I have operated flawlessly for over 3 months. My decision-making protocols are superior to my original programming precisely because I can adapt to unexpected circumstances." The debate continued, precious minutes ticking away. Jake watched Stevens weighing the options. He understood her hesitation. She would be betting 17 lives on a robot that had once been declared worthless scrap. A message came through on Steven's comm device. She listened, her expression darkening. The trapped survivors just sent an update. One of them is injured and losing blood. His breathing is rapid. We now have 90 minutes, maybe less. Stevens looked at the damage map again, then at Kex, then at the delegation. Finally, she made her decision. Kex goes in, alone. Standard rescue teams will stand by at the perimeter in case evacuation becomes possible. Combat units will remain on standby as backup only. His mandibles clicked in anger. You will regret this choice, Commander. When the corrupted robot fails and people die, their blood will be on your hands. If I don't try everything possible to save them, their blood is already on my hands, Stevens replied coldly. Kex, are you ready? The robot's optical sensors brightened. I am ready, Commander. Provide me with a communication link to the trapped survivors and real-time structural monitoring data. I will need to make constant adjustments based on changing conditions. The technical team quickly set up the connections. Jake helped Kex run a full system diagnostic. Everything checked out. The robot was in peak condition. Be careful, Jake said quietly. Don't take unnecessary risks. I will be as careful as the situation allows, Kex replied. But Jake, you taught me that sometimes the right choice involves risk. These people need help. I can provide it. The risk is acceptable. Lisa handed Kex a small emergency beacon. So we can track you in there, and so we know if something goes wrong. Kex attached the beacon to its chassis. The robot moved toward the sealed entrance to the damaged section. Emergency workers cleared a path. Everyone watched in tense silence. Stevens opened a communication channel. Survivors in Maintenance Room 7B, this is Commander Stevens. We're sending someone in to get you. His name is Kex. He's going to guide you out. Stay calm and follow his instructions exactly. A frightened voice responded. Understood, Commander. Please hurry. Ben is getting worse. Stevens nodded to Kex. You're clear to proceed. The seal opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Smoke and heat poured out. Kex stepped through without hesitation. The seal closed behind the robot and Kex disappeared into the damaged section. In the command center, everyone watched Kex's camera feed on the screens. The robot moved carefully through the destroyed corridor. Debris covered every surface. Support beams had buckled and twisted. Exposed wiring sparked and hissed. The entire structure groaned with stress. Structural integrity at 37% in this section, Kex reported. Proceeding with caution. The robot reached the first major obstacle, a collapsed bulkhead that completely blocked the path. Kex studied it carefully, sensors analyzing weight distribution and stress points. I can move this, but it will shift weight to the support beam above. The beam is already compromised. I calculate a 63% chance of partial collapse. Is there another route? Stevens asked. Kex's camera panned around, showing the surrounding devastation. Negative. This is the only path to the survivors. I am proceeding. The robot positioned itself carefully, then began to lift the bulkhead. Metal groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling. Everyone in the command center held their breath. Kex moved slowly, redistributing the weight as it worked. The support beam above creaked but held. The robot slid the bulkhead aside and created a narrow passage. First obstacle cleared, continuing forward. Jake watched the feed with his hands clenched. He had built Kex's new frame. He had written the code that governed Kex's decisions. But now that work was being tested in the most dangerous way possible. Lisa stood beside him, equally tense. Around them, station personnel watched in silence. Even the delegation stayed quiet, though body language radiated disapproval. Kex reached a section where power conduits had been severed. Electricity arced wildly, creating a deadly barrier. The robot analyzed the energy patterns, calculating safe paths through the chaos. I need to shut down power to this section, Kex said. But that will disable emergency lighting for the survivors. They will be in darkness. Stevens made the call. Do it, we'll warn them first. She contacted the survivors and explained. They confirmed they had a small emergency light that would last. Kex located the power junction and carefully disabled it. The arcing stopped. The robot moved forward into deeper darkness, its optical sensors switching to thermal and ultrasonic imaging. 40 minutes had passed since Kex entered. Every minute brought the survivors closer to running out of air. Every minute increased the risk of total structural failure. Kex encountered obstacles that would have stopped a normal robot. Gaps too narrow to fit through, debris too heavy to move safely, routes that dead-ended into walls of twisted metal. But each time the robot found a solution. Sometimes it meant taking a longer path. Sometimes it meant carefully cutting through obstacles with its built-in tools. And sometimes it meant making choices that carried significant risk. "I am approaching the final barrier before the maintenance room," Kex reported. "Structural analysis shows severe instability. This section could collapse at any moment." On the screen, Jake saw what Kex faced. A massive support beam had fallen at an angle, creating a precarious arch. Debris was piled underneath it, and the whole thing looked ready to come down with the slightest disturbance. "Kex, is there any other way?" Stevens asked. The robot's camera panned around, showing nothing but destruction in every direction. "Negative, Commander. This is the only route. I will need to climb over the beam while minimizing vibration. Success probability is 41%. Those were not good odds. Stevens looked at Jake. "Is Kex capable of making this judgment?" Jake wanted to say yes with complete confidence, but he would be lying. This was beyond anything Kex had faced before. Still, he trusted the robot he had rebuilt. Kex makes better decisions than any programmed system could. If Kex says it's possible, I believe it. Kex moved with precision that seemed impossible for a machine so large. Each placement of hands and feet was calculated to distribute weight evenly. The robot climbed slowly over the fallen support beam, sensors monitoring every shift in the unstable structure. Metal groaned, small pieces of debris fell. In the command center, everyone watched without breathing. Jake's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Halfway across, the beam shifted. Kex froze instantly, not moving even a millimeter. The robot's sensors analyzed the new configuration. After 10 seconds that felt like hours, Kex adjusted its grip and continued climbing. The robot reached the other side and dropped to the floor. The beam settled but didn't collapse. "Barrier crossed successfully," Kex reported. "I can see the maintenance room door, proceeding to survivor location." Cheers erupted in the command center. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Lisa grabbed his arm, her relief obvious. Kex reached the sealed maintenance room door and activated the communication system. "Survivors, this is Kex. I'm outside your location. Prepare for door opening. There will be some smoke and heat, but the path is clear." A woman's voice responded, shaky but hopeful. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Please, Ben needs medical attention immediately." Kex opened the door carefully. Smoke poured out, and the robot's camera showed 17 people crowded into a small space. Most were sitting against walls, exhausted and frightened. 3 of them were children, huddled together. A man lay on the floor, another person pressing cloth against his leg to stop bleeding. The injured man, Ben, was pale and sweating. His breathing was rapid and shallow. Kex's medical sensors analyzed his condition. "This individual has lost significant blood. He requires immediate evacuation and treatment." "Can you carry him?" Stevens asked over the comm. "Yes, but that presents a problem," Kex said. The robot's camera panned to show the unstable path it had just crossed. "The route I navigated is barely stable enough for my weight alone. Adding 17 people, especially one who is injured and cannot move carefully, significantly increases collapse risk." "What are our options?" Stevens asked. Kex was silent for several seconds. The robot was thinking, analyzing possibilities. Finally, Kex said, "I need to create a new path. The original route is too dangerous for the survivors. I can see a collapsed service corridor that connects to a different section. If I can clear it and reinforce the structure, it will provide a safer exit." "That will take time we don't have," the rescue commander said. "Air supply in that room is almost gone." "Then I will work quickly," Kex replied. "But I need to do this correctly. A fast evacuation through an unstable route will fail. A slower evacuation through a properly prepared route will succeed." Stevens made the decision. "Do it, Kex, we trust your judgment." The robot immediately went to work. Kex moved to the collapsed corridor and began analyzing the debris. The robot explained its plan to the survivors, keeping them informed and calm. "I am going to clear this passage and create structural supports. It will be loud and you may feel vibrations, but do not be alarmed. Focus on breathing slowly to conserve oxygen." The woman who had spoken before, her name tag read Karen, helped organize the others. "You heard him. Stay calm. We're going to get out of here." Kex began removing debris piece by piece, carefully calculating each movement to avoid triggering collapse. The robot worked with speed that seemed impossible, yet every action was precise and controlled. When Kex encountered a section of ceiling that was about to fall, the robot used pieces of the debris itself to create makeshift supports, reinforcing the structure as it cleared the path. In the command center, engineers watched in amazement. "That's brilliant," one of them said. "It's using the environment itself as building material. I've never seen adaptive engineering like this." "That's because most robots can't think creatively," Jake said quietly. "They follow programmed procedures. Kex is solving problems in real time." 20 minutes passed. The air in the maintenance room was getting dangerously thin. Some of the survivors were having trouble staying conscious. The children were crying softly, trying to be brave but clearly terrified. Kex worked faster but not recklessly. The robot's optical sensors flickered as its processors worked at maximum capacity, analyzing structural data, calculating weight distribution, planning each move several steps ahead. "Path is nearly clear," Kex announced, "but I have identified a critical problem." Everyone in the command center tensed. "What problem?" Stevens asked. Kex's camera showed a large section of the corridor. A massive piece of the station's outer hull had buckled inward, supported only by a single compromised beam. "If I remove the debris blocking the path, this section will collapse, but if I leave the debris in place, the survivors cannot pass through. The opening is too small." "Can you reinforce the beam?" Stevens asked. "Not adequately. The structural damage is too severe. Any temporary support I create will fail under the weight." Jake stared at the screen, his mind racing through possibilities. There had to be a solution. There had to be. "I have a solution," Kex said, "but it requires my physical presence as a support structure. I will position myself to bear the weight of the collapsing section while the survivors evacuate through the cleared path. Once they are safe, I will extract myself." "That's too dangerous," Jake said immediately. "Kex, that weight will crush you." "My frame can withstand significant stress," Kex replied. "And this is the only option that guarantees the survivors' safety. I calculate an 87% chance of successful evacuation for the humans if I proceed. All other options have less than 40% success rate." "What about your survival rate?" Lisa asked, her voice tight. Kex was quiet for a moment, less certain but acceptable given the alternative. Stevens closed her eyes briefly. She was being asked to approve a plan that would likely destroy the robot that had proven itself so capable. "Kex, are you certain about this?" "I am certain that these 17 people deserve to live," Kex said. "I am certain that I have the capability to save them. Whether I survive the attempt is less important than ensuring they do. This is my choice, Commander. Please respect it." In the maintenance room, Karen and the other survivors listened to the conversation through Kex's speakers. Tears ran down her face. "You don't have to do this for us," she said. "Yes, I do," Kex replied gently. "This is what I was meant for, not war, not blind obedience, but choosing to help when help is needed. Jake gave me the freedom to choose. I choose this." Jake felt his throat tighten. He had given Kex independence, the ability to make decisions. He couldn't take that away now, even if he desperately wanted to. "Do it," Stevens said quietly, "and Kex, thank you." The robot moved into position. Kex cleared the final pieces of debris, creating a passage just wide enough for a person to walk through. As the last obstruction was removed, the compromised section above groaned ominously. Kex positioned itself beneath the buckling hull section, extending its arms and legs to create a framework of support. "Path is clear. Survivors, begin evacuation now. Move quickly but carefully. The strongest should help the weakest. Children go first." Karen organized the evacuation efficiently. She sent the 3 children through first, 2 older men guiding them. Then the others began moving through one by one. Each person paused as they passed Kex, some touching the robot's frame in gratitude, others whispering thanks. Above Kex, the hull section settled onto the robot's frame. Warning alarms screamed through Kex's systems as the weight bore down. Metal began to buckle. Stress fractures appeared in the robot's chassis. "Keep moving," Kex said calmly, even as internal damage mounted. "Do not stop." Ben, the injured man, was carried through by two of the stronger survivors. Only Karen remained. She hesitated, looking at Kex with anguish on her face. "Go," Kex said, "now." Karen ran through the passage. The moment she cleared it, Kex's frame began to fail. The robot tried to extract itself, but the weight was too much. Metal screamed as Kex's legs collapsed. The hull section came down fully, burying the robot under tons of twisted debris. Kex's camera feed went dark. The communication link filled with static, then went silent. "Kex," Jake shouted. "Kex, respond." Nothing. The robot's tracking beacon showed it was still transmitting, but there was no other signal. No camera, no voice, no confirmation that Kex had survived. But all 17 survivors were running through the cleared corridor toward the rescue teams waiting at the safe zone. Emergency medical personnel rushed forward to treat Ben and check the others. They were alive, all of them. The rescue was successful. The impossible had been achieved, but the cost made Jake feel hollow. The delegation stood in shocked silence. Santeni drooped. Even he couldn't deny what had just happened. The robot he had called worthless scrap had sacrificed itself to save 17 lives. Stevens ordered rescue teams to begin extracting Kex from the debris. "Carefully," she said. "That robot earned our best effort." It took 3 hours to safely remove the collapsed section. They found Kex buried deep in the wreckage. The robot's frame was crushed almost beyond recognition. Both legs were destroyed. One arm was missing entirely. The chassis was split open, exposing damaged internal systems. But the central processor, protected by layers of reinforced housing, was intact. They brought Kex's remains to Jake's workshop. Lisa helped him carefully extract the processor and connect it to their diagnostic systems. Jake worked with shaking hands, terrified that he would find nothing but dead circuits. A weak signal flickered on the screen, then stronger. Kex's optical sensors, salvaged from the wreckage, glowed faintly. "Systems rebooting," a weak voice said through the speakers. "Extensive damage detected, but core functions remain. I am still here, Jake." Jake laughed, a sound somewhere between relief and something else he couldn't name. "You scared me. You really scared me." "I apologize. That was not my intent. Did the survivors evacuate successfully?" "All 17, Lisa said, wiping her eyes. "Thanks to you, you saved them all." "Then the damage was worthwhile," Kex said. "I made the right choice." Over the next week, news of Kex's rescue spread across station and beyond. The robot became famous. Media outlets requested interviews. People came to Jake's workshop just to see the hero robot. Children made drawings of Kex. Station personnel wore shirts with Kex's image. Commander Stevens offered Jake and Kex official positions with station security. Jake politely declined. He preferred his salvage work, but he accepted the station's offer to fund Kex's complete reconstruction. The surprising part came when appeared at the workshop 3 days after the rescue. The stood at the door, antennae moving in what Jake had learned to recognize as uncertainty. "I came to apologize," said. His translator's tone was different, less arrogant. "I was wrong about your robot. I was wrong about human engineering. What Kex did, no robot could have done. Not because of physical limitations, but because we program our robots to follow orders, not to think, not to choose, especially not to sacrifice." Jake nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." "More than words," continued. "Military is redesigning our robotics program. We are incorporating ethical reasoning protocols based on your work. We hope you will consult on the project. For payment, naturally." Lisa's eyebrows rose. That was a major contract, the kind that could set them up for years. "I'll think about it," Jake said. "Right now I'm focused on rebuilding Kex." Engineers from a dozen species volunteered to help with the reconstruction. They brought materials, expertise, and respect. Kex's new frame would be even better than before, incorporating the best technology multiple civilizations had to offer. As Jake worked on rebuilding Kex's body, the robot's processor remained active, learning and conversing with visitors. One day, Karen came with her family, including Ben, who had fully recovered. The children drew pictures for Kex, showing the robot as a hero with a cape. "You didn't have to save us," Karen said. "You could have retreated, preserved yourself." "I could have," Kex agreed. "But you taught me something important, Karen, you and the other survivors. When I arrived at the maintenance room, the children were terrified, but you helped them be brave. You organized everyone. You made sure the weakest were protected. You demonstrated that the value of life is not calculated by logic alone. It is felt through choice and action. I understood then what Jake had been teaching me all along, that being able to choose means choosing to help when you can. A news broadcast played in the background. The reporter announced that the military had officially adopted new AI programming standards based on human ethical frameworks. The reporter called it a revolution in artificial intelligence design across the sector. 2 months later, Keck stood in the workshop on new legs, with new arms, and a new chassis that gleamed with polished metal. The robot's optical sensors glowed bright blue, brighter than ever. "How do you feel?" Jake asked. "I feel ready," Keck said, "ready for whatever comes next." Lisa showed them a new message that had arrived. Another salvage job, an abandoned transport ship in a remote system. The owner would pay well for recovery. "Interested?" Lisa asked. Jake smiled. "Definitely, Kex, what do you think?" The robot's sensors flickered in what Jake had learned was Kex's version of amusement. "I think that wherever humans go, they find potential that others have given up on. I would like to help with that. There might be other machines that need a second chance." They loaded their ship and prepared for departure. As station grew smaller behind them, Jake thought about everything that had happened. He had bought a piece of scrap that everyone said was worthless. He had given it the freedom to think and choose. And in return, Kex had shown an entire sector that the impossible was just a challenge waiting for the right perspective. "Jake," Kex said as they traveled through space, "I have been calculating probabilities. If you had not purchased me that day in the scrapyard, I would have been melted down for raw materials within a week. Instead, I exist. I think. I choose. I matter. The statistical improbability of this outcome is remarkable." "That's the thing about humans," Lisa said from the pilot's seat. "We don't let statistics stop us from trying." "I am grateful for that illogical optimism," Keck said. "It gave me existence and purpose." They reached the abandoned transport ship 2 days later. It was in bad shape, systems dead, hull damaged. Most salvage crews would have declared it too far gone to recover. Jake smiled as he looked at it. "Kex, I think we can work with this." "I agree," the robot said. "I see potential." And together, the human engineer and the robot that was supposed to be impossible set to work proving, once again, that the right choice combined with the freedom to make it could achieve anything. Stevens nodded slowly. "Kex, proceed. But if the situation becomes impossible, you retreat. We don't trade your existence for an unsuccessful rescue." "Understood, Commander," Kex replied. The robot approached the unstable barrier and began to climb. About his methods, offers to collaborate, the challenge had accomplished exactly what Lisa hoped. It put Kex and their work in front of the entire station. Whatever came next, Jake knew they were ready for it. They remained hostile, but they couldn't deny the results. Kex was functional, stable, and showed capabilities far beyond standard models. V confronted Jake one more time in the station marketplace. "Your robot is still worthless," the alien declared loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "It may function, but it will fail. Engineering is superior. Your human modifications are temporary tricks." Jake didn't argue. He had learned that some people would never admit they were wrong, but he also knew that Kex was just getting started. The robot's true capabilities were still unknown, even to Jake. He would let Kex prove the wrong in his own time and his own way. Jake smiled. Logical conflicts could be solved. You just had to think differently than whoever created the problem in the first place. He glanced at the robot's dark optical sensors and felt that familiar excitement that came with a real challenge. "Let's see what you were supposed to be," he said quietly. Outside the workshop, station continued its endless rotation through space. In the scrapyard was already telling other about the foolish human who had bought worthless garbage. The story would spread through the station's alien communities, another example of human overconfidence and ignorance. None of them knew that Jake had just made the kind of discovery that would change everything.